Good morning, Housing Authority Board of Directors. So Director Willie, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Clerk Moss. We will convene the August 2nd Housing Authority Board of Directors meeting. Would you please take a roll call, Clerk Moss?
Yes, I can, Mr. Director. Director Roper?
Here.
Director Harrington? Yep, you're here. Director Treese?
Here.
Director Rogers?
Here.
Director Willie?
Here.
And I will keep an eye out for Director Savara.
Great, thank you very much. We will now have public communication. This is an opportunity for our community to weigh in for 2 minutes. Do we have anybody signed up for this?
Thank you, Director Willie. Would any members of the public wish to provide comment to the Housing Authority Board of Directors for up to 2 minutes at this time? I'll give you just a moment to utilize the raised hand function. Not seeing any hands, Director Willie. Director Treese?
Clerk Moss, did you call Director Fye?
Oh.
I just want to make sure she's on the record.
My apologies, Director Fye?
Here.
Thank you, and Director Savara is joining as well, so we have a full complement.
Great, thank you. Good catch on that, Pam. Thank you for that. So the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which includes the minutes, of course, from June 21. The approval of the write-off balances from former tenants in low rent income housing program, and to approve a resolution and order in the matter of authorizing the issuance of up to $20,175,000 of revenue bonds for the Gold Crest apartment project. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
A motion.
I have a motion and a second. I'm sorry, the motion was Director Roper. Second was from Chair Harrington. Any questions, any comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye, raising your hand. Thank you. Yeah. Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. We now have, going back to public communication, this is a 5-minute opportunity. Is there anyone that would like to speak to us in this?
Thank you, Director Willie. Would any members of the public wish to provide comment to the Housing Authority Board of Directors for up to 5 minutes at this time? I will give you just a moment to utilize the raise hand function. Not seeing any hands, Director Willie.
Okay, thank you. Directors Roper and Savara, been a pretty quick meeting. Do you have anything that you'd like to communicate or update any of us on? Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Usually I do have an update, but just to have everybody be safe and, just watch out for fires, be conservative of your water, and I'm glad to see you guys. August came so quick.
It did that, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
Okay, yeah, we'd like to enjoy some weather that's not 100 degrees. So any other comments by the directors? If not, motion to adjourn.
A motion.
Second.
I have a motion from Director Roper, a second from Director Savara. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. And we are now going to move into the Board of Directors, Washington County Commissioner Board of Directors. So thank you, everybody. So Clerk Moss, are we ready to go?
We are ready to go, Chair Willie.
All right, thank you. We will now convene the Washington County Board of Commissioners board meeting for August 2nd. Could I have a roll call, please?
Yes, you can, Chair Willie. Chair Harrington?
Here.
Commissioner Fye?
Here.
Commissioner Rogers?
Here.
Commissioner Treese?
Here.
Vice Chair Willie?
Here.
And I will announce Vice Chair Willie will be taking over chair in this meeting while Chair Harrington is joining us on her vacation. So Chair Willie, over to you.
Thank you very much. This is when we have public communication. Is there anyone signed up to speak to us at this time?
Thank you, Chair Willie. Would any members of the public wish to provide public comment at this time to the Board of Commissioners for up to 2 minutes? I'll give you just a moment to utilize the raise hand function. Not seeing any hands, Chair Willie.
Okay, thank you very much. Next step is the consent agenda, and as you can see from the agenda, we have 18 items on the consent agenda. I did not categorize them such as the chair does very efficiently, so you can certainly see. Go ahead, Roy.
I just move to approve.
Thank you. Motion to approve the consent agenda, second by Commissioner Treese. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye, raising your hands. Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. I gotta move on to my screen here. This makes you appreciate your position, Chair Harrington, on this. We got a lot of moving parts in this. So, next item is the proclamation for the August 2022 National Breastfeeding Month in Washington County. And we'd like to invite Mir Simantel, who's our interim HHS director, to join us.
So, Chair Willie, we do not have them on in the second, so let me work in the background to see if I can get them available for you as we're moving quickly this morning.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Mr. Vice Chair, though it may seem odd, for me to make the motion, I would be happy to do that in case there's any sort of a difficulty in connecting folks. So for sake of efficiency and making certain that we get this handled, I would be more than delighted to make the motion.
I think they prefer us to hear the proclamation and the report before we get to that point, Roy. So thank you very much. But yeah, we're just gonna take a pause here. Also, just a little, my own public service announcement here that if we are finished with the board meeting early being somewhere before 12 o'clock, I would like to ask if we could have the one item that's for our work session that's scheduled for 1 o'clock, if we might be able to move that up. That would facilitate the chair getting to go back on vacation and certainly open up the afternoon. So that's, I've got that in the queue just in case.
And Vice Chair Willie, just to confirm, staff are ready to do that.
Thank you.
But Vice Chair Willie, I am trying to figure out where Mira and her staff are. I'm not prepared to give the presentation.
Would you?
You may want, I mean, you could move on if that's better for your schedule. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what's going on.
That's okay. I didn't want to start into the public hearings. There's 3 public hearings. That's probably going to be a little bit more time. So it would be later if they want to come in later and do the proclamation. I'm fine with that.
That's fine. They can do that after the public hearings. I'll keep working on trying to connect with them and figure out what's going on.
Yes,
okay.
Chair Willie, we do have Mayor Simantel joining right now.
Oh, perfect.
Mira, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Kevin. Hi, good morning. I'm not sure if the rest of my team, though, has gotten online yet. My apologies. I have had the board meeting starting at 10:30, but I can reach out to them.
Or I'll give you a pause on that, Mir, if you would like. We have 3 public meetings, public hearings coming up next, so it would probably be a while before we get back to you. But if you want to wait and do that afterwards, that's fine.
Okay, thank you so much, Commissioner Willie. Yes, let's go ahead and do that because I really want to make sure we have our guest available to join us for the proclamation. I think that's really important. So thank you and my apologies for any inconvenience, and we'll join you when it's time.
No problem. We can be flexible. Okay, we're going to skip over item D1 and we're going to move to item E1, public hearings. We're going to hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution in order approving the Clean Water Services pay plan for non-essential employees for fiscal year 20, non-represented, not non-essential, gee, many Christmas, non-represented employees for fiscal year 22-23. And with us, we have Holly Dober, Human Resources and Risk Management Director for Clean Water Services. Is Holly with us?
She is not, Chair Willie. Let me see if we can get it. So I would recommend we kind of take a quick, like 5-minute pause so I can gather the staff and then we can reconvene.
Okay, I see we have Jerry, and so, yeah, we're getting there. It's okay. Yeah, let's do that. Let's take a 5-minute break and because we are really speeding through the agenda a little bit today. And so we want to make sure everybody's aware of that. So we're going to take 5.
Roy, you're unmuted.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rogers, Commissioner Fye, Chair Harrington, are you back with us? All right, back over to you, Chair Willie.
I'm here too.
He is going to forget about you today, Nafisa, unless we continually remind him. So thanks for that.
Being brave.
Okay.
You know.
Thank you. We're going to reconvene our Board of Commission meeting for August 2nd. We have skipped over item D1. We will do that after the public hearings. We are on item E1 right now, which is a public hearing and adopt a resolution in order approving the Clean Water Services pay plan for non-represented employees in the fiscal year 22-23. Here to make this, provide this information is Holly Dober, who is the Human Resources and Risk Management Director for Clean Water Services. Holly?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Vice Chair Willie, and Madam Chair Harrington and Commissioners. Good morning. Thank you for having me today. My name is Holly Dober. I'm the Director of Human Resources and Risk Management for Clean Water Services. I'll start with my staff report. First, I'd like to start by recognizing the employees at Clean Water Services. They are collaborative, innovative, and hardworking individuals who provide services to the community. I'd like to thank all of the employees for the amazing work that they do and all of their accomplishments this past year. The item before you is a public hearing to adopt resolution and order approving Clean Water Services pay plan for non-represented employees for fiscal year 2022-2023. As required in the district's employment policies and guidelines, the district is recommending that the board adopt the pay plan establishing salaries for non-represented employees based on the adopted budget on June 21st, 2022. The pay plan represents a 2% increase to the market point in the salary range. The district utilizes a performance-based pay compensation system, and employees receive pay increases through the annual performance appraisal process. District employees do not receive an automatic cost of living adjustment, nor do they receive step increases. Therefore, no individual increases will occur as a result of the range movement on the pay plan. The additional items in Exhibit B are really housekeeping items from the planning and execution of the fiscal year 2023 budget. It includes 4 additional full-time positions, 14 redesignations, 9 job title changes, and 7 new job titles that were added to this pay plan. The fiscal impact for these changes are funded by savings or a contingency transfer as appropriate to the program, or by a transfer of funds from the non-departmental budget. And if you have any questions or comments, I'm happy to answer those now.
Commissioners, any comments or questions of Holly? Not seeing any, so thank you very much, Holly. So at this time, I will open the public hearing. Since I don't have an official gavel, I'll just go like that and we'll call that good. I'm going to open the public hearing on item E1. Is there anyone who would like to comment?
Thank you, Chair Willie. Would any members of the public wish to provide public testimony on this item E1, approval of the non-represented pay plan for Clean Water Services? I'll give you just a moment to utilize the raise hand function. Not seeing any hands, Chair Willie.
All right. Thank you very much, Clerk Moss. I will now close the public hearing and entertain a motion to approve the resolution in order. A motion by Commissioner Treese, second by Commissioner Rogers, I believe. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously 5-0. So thank you for that, Holly, and Jerry, thank you very much for joining us today. Item
Vice Chair Willie, just for the record, I believe Commissioner Rogers made the motion and Commissioner Treese seconded.
Okay, I had that backwards. Sorry. Too many Hollywood squares here. So anyway, thank you very much for clarifying that, Jerry. And yeah, so we're good. Item E2, consider annexation of 2 tax lots and right-of-way totaling approximately 1 acre to the Tualatin Hills Parks and Rec District. And with that presentation will be Stephen Roberts, Director of Land Use and Transportation, I believe. Stephen?
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'm actually going to turn things over to Brian Robb from our long-range planning work group, who's going to walk us through a brief staff report, and then we'll be able to answer any questions or that you may have after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, Vice Chair Willie. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Brian Robb, Associate Planner with Land Use and Transportation. The tax lots, next page, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. The tax lots depicted here are located at 985 and 1035 Northwest Saltzman Road, approximately 500 feet north of Northwest Cornell Road. And the properties are located in the Cedar Hills, Cedar Mill Community Plan area. Next slide, please. This proposal is a request by property owner Saltzman Road Apartments, LLC, to annex 2 tax lots and right-of-way into the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District. This request was initiated by a consent petition from the property owners. County staff has reviewed the request and found that it meets the criteria for boundary changes as outlined in the staff report. Next slide, please. Staff recommends that the board conduct the public hearing and at the conclusion of the hearing, adopt a resolution in order approving the annexation with the approval becoming effective immediately. If there's any public testimony, there's a brief statement I'll need to read into the record beforehand. Next slide, please. That will conclude my presentation. I can answer any questions you may have.
Commissioners, any questions? Seeing none, I will now open the public hearing for item E2 and ask Clerk Moss, is there anyone who would like to testify?
Thank you, Chair Willie. Would any members of the public wish to provide public testimony on this item E2, annexation of the property to Tualatin Hills Parks and Rec District? I'll give you just a moment to utilize the raise hand function. Not seeing any hands, Chair Willie.
All right. Seeing that, I will close the public hearing, entertain a motion to consider the annexation of these 2 lots in the right-of-way. I have a motion from Commissioner Fye, second from Commissioner Treese. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Okay. Those opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Now move on to public hearing E3. Consider a proposed engrossed ordinance number 882, an ordinance amending the transportation system plan element of the comprehensive plan relating to the extension of Tile Flat Road. I would like to first entertain a motion that this be read by title only. Is that where I start, Stephen? I think I need a little help there.
So
Do I also include ordinance 888, or is that a separate?
888 is separate.
Okay, so this will be title only for ordinance 882. I have a motion from Commissioner Rogers. I have a second. I can only see 4 people on this. So is there a second? Thank you. I have a second from Chair Harrington. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Tom, would you read by title only, please?
Of course, an ordinance amending the transportation system plan element of the comprehensive plan relating to an extension of Tile Flat Road. This is hearing number 2, continued from July 26, 2022.
Thank you. And Director Roberts, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioners. And again, I'm going to turn to Aaron Wardell, who's our principal planner for transportation planning, who's going to walk through a presentation, and then we'll be happy again to answer any questions that you may have at the conclusion of that, and then look forward to the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. My name is Erin Wardell, Principal Transportation Planner. Can we please go to the next slide? So here's an overview of our presentation for today. We will be reviewing the Tile Flat Road extension planning, reviewing the community engagement and public outreach that we conducted, reviewing our prior public hearings and engrossment amendments, and then finally ending with our staff recommendation. As this is the second engrossment hearing for this ordinance, the board will have the opportunity to take formal action on it if you choose at the end of this public hearing. Next slide, please. So the Tile Flat Road extension has been under analysis for a number of years. It was initially identified on a map through the South Cooper Mountain planning process. That's what this graphic on the slide shows. This is from the City of Beaverton's Cooper Mountain project from 2014. Washington County then conducted the Transportation Future Study, which was a long-range 50-year look at our transportation system needs as Washington County grows and builds out through our urban reserve areas. As a part of that work, we connected pretty extensively with the neighbors who live up on Cooper Mountain, who wanted to promote the idea of the around the mountain, all-weather resilient route for the transportation system after they identified a number of issues with 175th. The board authorized through the Tier 1 Long Range Planning Work Program, then the Cooper Mountain Transportation Study, which was an opportunity for us to continue the technical analysis of opportunities for building a transportation system around the Cooper Mountain area. We then extended that work through the Urban Reserves Transportation Study, which was an opportunity to look at what our transportation system needs are as the urban reserve areas are gradually brought into the urban growth boundary and what kind of a transportation system we need to be providing. This road extension was included in Tigard's River Terrace 2.0 concept plan, which Tigard prepared in 2021 and used to ask Metro to do a mid-cycle expansion of the urban growth boundary at the end of 2021. We'll talk more about that in a later slide. We also referenced the need for this important collector facility in our urban planning area agreement with the City of Tigard, which was adopted through Ordinance number 879. Next slide. The Tile Flat Road proposed transportation system amendment would extend Tile Flat Road in our plan as a collector facility south from Shoals Ferry Road to connect with Roy Rogers Road at Bull Mountain Road. We've also identified the need for further transportation system amendments south of Bull Mountain Road to Beef Bend Road. We've identified this or proposed to identify this as what we call a refinement area in our plan. That means we've identified a need for further transportation system planning, but due to some other planning work happening in the area and some uncertainty around the timing of some of that development, we're proposing that to be brought in as a refinement area. Most of that actually has to do with some development work happening on the east side of Roy Rogers Road and consideration of the future location of the intersection of Beef Bend Road. But of course, that would affect planning on the west side of the road as well. The extension of Tile Flat Road is envisioned as a long-range improvement. We've identified it as a need within our 20-year transportation system plan. So it wouldn't necessarily be built in the near future, but including it in our plan allows for us to conduct orderly planning. The road is unlikely to be built until most of the area is brought into the urban growth boundary, but that primarily has to do with available transportation system funding. We know through going through the MISTIP 23-28 funding allocation process right now that we simply don't have enough transportation funds for all of our identified need. That doesn't mean that we don't want to include it in our plan to inform our other planning efforts, but the identified funding for it may be in the long-range future. Next slide. There are some benefits to adding the Tile Flat Road extension to the transportation system plan at this time, even if it may not be built in the near future. This extension considers the future travel needs in Washington County. It improves our transportation system connectivity and redundancy and provides options for future travelers. If you recall, during the Ordinance 881 hearings, we heard a lot from residents who live on top of Cooper Mountain talking about the snow zone on 175th and icy conditions. That is something that does occur in the winter, and so this was part of the impetus behind the around the mountain idea in the first place. Adding the extension to our plan document accommodates our recent and expected future urban growth boundary expansions in these designated urban reserve areas. As I mentioned earlier, it is consistent with our urban planning area agreement with the city of Tigard. That is the agreement that guides Tigard's planning processes for their future expansion. The addition of this facility to our plan informs our planning for all of the other elements of our transportation system. We generally don't just plan one facility at a time, we look at our entire system. And so this will inform our future planning for some of the other facilities in and around the Cooper Mountain area. And then finally, one of the most important reasons to add a facility to our transportation system plan is that it helps us preserve right-of-way for this future road. It allows the county or the city to condition developers to build part of the road when development occurs. That minimizes future public funding needed. And without the road reflected in our plan document, we can't do either of those things. And I want to tell a quick story about something that can happen within an urban reserve area, because while they are rural, there are sometimes developments that can occur. The city of Sherwood has a large urban reserve area to the west of the city, known as Sherwood West. In 2017, Sherwood was preparing concept plans for that area with the intent to ask Metro to bring it in as part of the 2018 urban growth boundary expansion process. After Sherwood prepared their concept plan, the Sherwood School District purchased over 80 acres of the urban reserve area with the intent to build a high school on that site. They were able to bring it into the urban growth boundary immediately under a minor adjustment process. So within a matter of months, an area that had been planned as an urban reserve became an urban within the urban growth boundary within the city of Sherwood parcel and was developed with a 2,400 student high school within 2 years. We had an active capital project immediately adjacent to that site. It was under design. The timing actually worked out pretty well because we were able to work with the school district to change that roundabout, which now exists at Elwert Road and Kruger. And so we were able to complete the design process and complete that roundabout improvement. But it really changed Sherwood's plans for that area. They've had to go back and revisit their concept plan. The urban reserves are intended to be planned comprehensively altogether. And this is an example of what can happen when you're not ready for development within your urban reserve. I'm not telling this story because I know that a school district is looking to add a high school, but there are things that can happen within our rural area. And without preserving the right-of-way that we know we need, we wouldn't be able to do that as a part of something like that occurring in this area. Next slide, please. So a number of pieces of testimony we've received actually have to do with the urban growth boundary expansion more than just the planning for this roadway. So I want to talk about that a little bit more in the next couple of slides. There are two types of rural land potentially affected by the tile flat road extension. The first is reflected in kind of the tan color on this graphic. Those are areas that are called rural no reserve. Sometimes we refer to them as undesignated because they don't have a designation. Those areas can be added to the urban growth boundary once 75% of Washington County's original urban reserves have been brought into the UGB. We're at about 40% right now, so we have quite a ways to go before we get to the time when those rural no reserve areas can be considered, but they can be considered at some point in the future. The next type of rural land is what is called urban reserve, and that is reflected in blue on the graphic that you see. We started the planning for the tile flat road extension, as I said, back in the 2014-2015 timeframe. In 2021, possibly late 2020, we learned that Tigard was planning to prepare a concept plan and ask for a 2021 urban growth boundary expansion. So our timing ended up right on top of each other, but we didn't intend it this way, and we'd already identified the need for the roadway without that urban growth boundary expansion. The board did submit a letter of support for Tigard's concept plan in October of 2021 and specifically referenced the need for this collector facility and the fact that we were planning for it. So again, the need for the tile flat road extension is not dependent on this UGB request, but they may end up timing-wise together anyway. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit more about the Metro Urban Growth Boundary expansion process because this is a little bit unusual what's happening right now. The county ends up in kind of an odd position with urban growth boundary expansions given the current rules. We do not ask for them, the cities ask for them, and we do not make the decision. Metro Council makes the decision. So we're somewhat reactionary when it comes to urban growth boundary expansions. As a part of Tigard's 2021 request, Metro reviewed Tigard's concept plan and determined that it was a good concept plan. It seemed ready to be added to the urban growth boundary. But rather than do an expansion, Metro's chief operating officer instead recommended doing a UGB land exchange. This is a process that's allowed for in state statute. It's not a process that's been done within the Portland metro area before. It has been done elsewhere in the state of Oregon. It's somewhat more likely to happen when it's one city with one urban growth boundary. They have some land maybe on the east side of the city that's ready to develop and some land on the west side within the urban growth boundary that's not ready. They do a fairly straightforward swap analysis. It's a little bit more complicated in Metro because Metro's urban growth boundary crosses 3 counties. So Metro staff are currently doing technical analysis to identify about 300 acres already within the urban growth boundary that they could move out of the urban growth boundary in exchange for adding Tigard's land. Metro Council, I understand, has scheduled their hearing for November. So we should know by the end of this year what their decision will be on this land swap. But we really don't have any other information about which direction they may go or which way they're leaning. We do have an idea that the concept plan was deemed to be adequate for the needs and did a really good job of addressing the needs and showed readiness for development. So we will see what Metro Council's decision is in November. Next slide. As a part of developing the tile flat extension ordinance, we have done extensive outreach through a number of planning studies. Those included the studies I mentioned previously, the South Cooper Mountain Plan, Tigard's River Terrace and River Terrace 2.0 concept plans and comprehensive planning efforts, the Cooper Mountain Transportation Study, and the Urban Reserves Transportation Study. As a part of this ordinance, we followed our statutorily required notification process. We also did 2 supplemental notifications to potentially affected property owners and offered virtual question and answer sessions. The second session was held on July 13th of this year. We had over 16 community members participate in that. Most of their questions did relate to the urban growth boundary expansion, but we did receive technical questions about why we identified the need for this roadway at this time, and we explained those at that time. Next slide. We have had a number of hearings on this particular ordinance. The Planning Commission held a hearing on December 15th of 2021. One of the updates we made to this presentation was to explain the Planning Commission's action at that hearing because there had been some confusion over it. The Planning Commission, after their public hearing, made a motion to recommend approval of the ordinance. That failed on a vote of 2 to 4, and no further motions were made. So the Planning Commission did not make a formal recommendation to reject the ordinance either, but the recommendation to approve failed. The board then held their first hearing on January 18th, and at that time continued deliberations to March 1st. At the board's March 1st hearing, the board directed staff to engross the ordinance to address case law regarding exceptions for roadway extensions. The county staff then came back with that engrossment last week on July 26th. So today is your second engrossment hearing and your opportunity to consider adoption. Next slide. So in summary, this ordinance proposes to amend the Transportation System Plan to add tile flat road extension as a collector road facility with a connection from Shoals Ferry Road to the intersection of Roy Rogers Road and Bull Mountain Road. The Transportation System Plan at this level identifies the general need, mode, function, and location of this future roadway facility. Other decisions about the precise location and design will be made at the time that the project is actually funded and developed. This ordinance also incorporates the goal exception analysis into our Transportation System Plan as a technical appendix. We are adding strategy language to our roadway element that recognizes there are unique circumstances when it makes sense to add a roadway in an urban reserve and rural no designation area. And we are adding a refinement area for study of a future roadway extension south of the tile flat road extension to the Beef Bend Road intersection. Next slide. As a part of adopting the ordinance, you will also have the ordinance findings as an action item. The findings address the exceptions that are required to be made to statewide planning goals 3, 4, 11, and 14. The process for taking an exception to statewide planning rules is adopted through statute. It's OAR 660-120070. So we're following all the procedures laid out by the state for planning within this particular type of area. These amendments are consistent with Metro's urban growth management functional plan as well. The amendments help implement a transportation system necessary to serve future needs and address statewide planning goal number 12. And the notification and public hearings have occurred as required by the state and local regulations. The findings will be adopted by resolution and order. Next slide. So the board has a couple of different options today. We've laid out 2 of them for you here. So the board options are to conduct the public hearing, and then at the conclusion, you can choose option 1, vote on whether or not to adopt a engrossed ordinance number 882, and then by separate action, vote on whether to adopt the associated findings. Your second option could be to continue the ordinance until a date certain to allow more time for the Metro urban growth boundary decision. If the board selects this option, staff recommend continuance to January 24th of 2023. That would give us enough time to see what Metro's decision is in November and prepare the necessary staff reports and all the other pieces of information we would need to do to bring this back to you. Next slide. Our staff recommendation remains the same as from the last hearing. So our recommendation is to conduct the public hearing and at the conclusion, adopt a engrossed ordinance number 882 and by separate action, adopt associated findings. And I think that is it for our slides today. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Erin. Any comments or questions from the commission? Chair Harrington.
Thank you, Vice Chair Willie. And I would like to reference a few of the slides along the way, just 2 actually. The first one is slide 6. And I'm sorry that I neglected to ask this question previously and looked at my records back when I was in Oregon. I recall testimony, I believe it was last Tuesday's meeting, from Ms. Ponzi. And I know that they have some property along Vandermost Road. And I believe staff assured us that there was proper notification and so forth. My question is this: for the westernmost boundary of the urban reserve, is that Vandermost Road or a different landmark?
Vandermost Road basically does run along that western edge of the urban reserve area. So it is the dividing line between the urban reserve and the rural no reserve designation. The Ponzi property is actually in the rural reserve area. So it's down in the green. It's not directly affected by the extension of Tile Flat Road, although there would be a future intersection with Vandermost Road.
I see. Okay, so just to make sure that I heard you correctly, Erin, the winery and their vineyard is in the green rural reserve area?
Yes.
Is it right at the boundary of the blue and the green, or is it further down in the green? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to see the proximity to the urban reserve area before I could answer that question.
Okay.
We did talk to Ms. Ponzi after the hearing regarding the confusion on the noticing, and what we learned was that she receives her mail at a location that is different from both the physical address of that property and the assessment and taxation listed property owner address. So we apologized for that confusion. We're limited by our public records sometimes, and we added the address. She receives her mail to our records. So future mailings will hopefully get to her at that address.
Oh, okay, so she had not received the notification. Okay.
No, unfortunately, in these situations where people own multiple properties and may receive mail at different properties, we're just somewhat limited by, it wasn't the physical property of this the physical address of this property in the rural reserve, and it wasn't the address we have on record with assessment and taxation, and we apologized. She had been involved through the planning commission process, and so she had been noticed of the hearings through some of that. And fortunately, neighbors were talking to neighbors, and so she was able to get the information from the neighbors as well. So,
okay, which somewhat relates to my second question, which is on the summary slide, number 10. Thank you. And so we previously directed engrossment, well, on you did a nice job with the timing slide of reminding me of a point in March, and then, and I can't remember now because I didn't make note of it in my notes. Oh, but I could look. Sorry.
the timing slide, I think, is number 9. If we go back 1. There we go.
Thank you. So, okay, yes. We directed engrossment. I believe that is when we had the testimony that I may be confusing January or March, but I'm assuming that the March meeting is where we heard testimony that led us to believe that there needed to be further work on the engrossments.
January meeting, actually. So the January meeting was the public hearing. And at that time, we received testimony, written testimony from Thousand Friends that referenced case law. And that case law essentially said, you can't just add the line to your map, you also have to add the technical findings to your plan document. So we had the exceptions analysis included as an appendix to our staff report. So we just recommended that we also adopt that into our transportation system plan as a technical appendix. It's no additional technical work. We're just elevating the importance of that technical analysis.
Thank you. I appreciate that. If we could display number 10 now. And I apologize for if I should have caught this previously and hadn't. I recall back in the March meeting, I checked back with my notes that are in the office, or back in Oregon, that that I had wondered about maybe going back to the Planning Commission for them to review the amendments for the engrossment. And so I'm wondering a little bit about that now, if we might be better served given where the proposal was earlier in the year. I appreciate that between LUT and Mr. Carr's general counsel office or county counsel office that you've done the work. But given the fact that in terms of how I have experienced, I've seen some folks be confused, thinking that this planning work is being done to allow that City of Tigard UGB expansion at Metro, which we've tried to be clear, it isn't. This is just requisite planning work per the Oregon land use system and Metro planning. But irregardless of that, there is some confusion, and the small difficulty, but it is a difficulty of that notice, and just making sure that there is time, given where the Planning Commission had been with the original 882, that do we have an option to take engrossed ordinance 882 and send it to the Planning Commission to get their recommendation oh, you might have answered this question before, it might have started that whole 120-day clock again?
Not exactly. So there isn't a 120-day clock on this particular type of an action. And so if the board would like us to do that, we could. I will say that the engrossment, again, it just adds that technical appendix that was attached to the staff report to the transportation system plan. So the planning commission already had all of that information, and it was a part of their hearing and their deliberations. And I believe they heard testimony from most of the same community members at their December 15th hearing, who the board has then heard testimony from. So I'm not entirely sure it would be particularly productive or new information going back to the planning commission. It would be the same information that we shared with them previously.
Okay. That it's just my confusion, Erin, that this summary is the summary of the entire Ordinance 882, which is at the engrossment stage, as opposed to understanding that the engrossment itself with these technical amendments achieved that whole list. I follow now.
It's a confusing process, and it is oftentimes confusing to our community that the board can make engrossments that do not go back to the planning commission, right? Because there can be really substantial engrossments made to an ordinance. So we often get this question from the community about, is something going back to the planning commission?
Thank you for being so gracious. I think it has more to do with the fact that I wanted to participate in today's meeting for this item and a subsequent one. And I'm attending during vacation, so I'll give myself credit for vacation brain and not remembering as many of the necessary details as otherwise. So that's why I needed to check in. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate your patience with my questions. I'm fully in line with where we're at, how we got here, and what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And that was, those are some good questions. Thank you very much for that. Good job, Erin, on responding to those. Is there any other questions from the commission? Could you take the slideshow down, because I can't see everyone if it's up? Thank you. So is there any other questions, comments that needs to be made?
Vice Chair Willie, I have my hand raised. So I have a quick question I'd like to ask. Chair,
Absolutely.
That's okay with me. Thank you. Erin, I think it's like the slide where you were making the 2 option recommendation. Sorry, Vice Chair Willie, to just go back to the slide.
That's okay. I don't mind if we're doing that. Just when we're not there. So yeah, go ahead.
Slide number 12.
Erin, Washington County is lucky to have you. I'm always impressed when you do a presentation. You have a brilliant mind. So congratulations to Washington County for having you as a staff. I learned a lot from you every time you talk and hear you present. I have a question about the 2 options in front of us today. And I sort of feel like in the whole presentation and the recommendations was sort of leaning to option 2, but then the last slide you said the staff recommendation is actually option 1. So how can we streamline that, the 2? Because it sounds like the best action today is to actually do option 2, which will give us more time and also entertain more conversations from community and constituents. And one of the constituents, and I told them I'll take back this question to Erin Wardell. They were also very impressed with you. They're a fan of yours. And the question was, instead of, a lot of the constituents complaining about the plowing through a farmland, what if this was a bridge? The planning, so I couldn't answer that question. I said, I'll take it back to Erin. So there's that question. People have legitimate concerns for the environment, what exists in that land, how we plan to disrupt, the habitat. So I'm just having a hard time reconciling the staff recommendations And then the presentation you presented, which to me led me option 2, which would give us more time to answer even questions like the bridge question. So what would you say to that? Am I getting myself confused and
No,
just heard what I wanted to hear? But
it's really the board's decision on which way you want to go. The staff recommendation is still to adopt the ordinance today and the associated findings. That's based on the fact that we have done all of the necessary technical evaluation to bring it forward to the board, and we've identified the need for this collector facility regardless of when that urban growth boundary expansion happens. Our timing ended up very confusing, and we acknowledge that. It's no one's fault. Again, Metro has their own process for urban growth boundary expansions. COVID also delayed our ordinance, bringing it forward. And so we ended up in this confusing time for the community when they're hearing about this urban growth boundary expansion and they're hearing about this road ordinance. And so, of course, they're going to start conflating those two things together. I think it's really important to have it in our plan earlier rather than later. I gave that Sherwood School District example of something that can happen when you're not ready to preserve your right-of-way for an identified facility. That being said, we prepared option 2 because of the conversation last time and hearing from the board that there may be some interest in letting the Metro process play out first. That is not staff recommendation, but it is something the board could consider doing if you would like that process to complete first. And then regarding your question about bridge structure, I actually think it's really likely that some of this will be a bridge structure. If you look at the topography of the area as a part of, I believe, the Cooper Mountain Transportation Study, but it might have been the Urban Reserves Transportation Study. We had some Portland State University engineering students do their practicum project looking at this potential road alignment, and they looked at LiDAR data and they did some field research, and they identified the number of wetlands and things like that that possibly would require bridge structure. It's going to be expensive to do that, but when we're dealing with sensitive environmental areas, we follow the framework of first we avoid, then we minimize, and then we mitigate. And so we won't know the answers to that until we get into the detailed design work, but our detailed design work will follow that framework. And so at that time, we'll be able to identify what we can do really to minimize as much as possible and still achieve the transportation network that we need.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioner Rogers.
Thank you. Aaron, go back to slide 5, please. The last major bullet with the 2 sub-bullets under there are critical, and I'd like you to comment on in a minute. But for the board, there's a lot of history right here. My preference years and years ago was we go up 175th. I always thought that was the best alternative, but a couple of things happened. One, the school district wanted 175th as we then knew it. It was no road, but it was some right-of-way. And so you see 175th going to about 160th. Well, not quite that much, but maybe 5-6 blocks. So it has a very big jog, so that the school district could build to their present location. So we're now faced with something that occurred as we started to move to the west. Rightly so, there was an issue from some folks up on Cooper Mountain who said, let's go around the mountain, and they made very compelling arguments, and the board at that time agreed, and so that's kind of how we got to where we're at, and I think Aaron did a good job of trying to say that. So we are where we are. Board's made decisions to interrupt what was the natural flow of 175th. Groups on 175th moved it to the west, which is tile flat. And now we're faced with dealing with something that we know if we're going to get any future development monies from developers as the area grows, and frankly 50 years from now people will long have forgotten this argument, but 50 years from now as things even develop more, we're going to look at what our grid pattern is. So I want you to comment or emphasize where it says allows county or cities to coordinate developers to build part of the road when development occurs. If we were to say no, because of other options being closed, who would build this road if there's no development money?
If there's no development money, it would have to be a publicly funded improvement, entirely publicly funded. And so by identifying it in our plan document, it allows us to exact from developers to dedicate the right of way and possibly build some amount of the facility going into the future.
And do you have a range in cost? That's my last question. Do you have a range in cost? And I know it's just throwing darts at the wall, but what would this facility potentially cost, high, low? Today's dollars?
We did do cost estimates as a part of the Urban Reserve Transportation Study. And off the top of my head, I'm not recalling what those cost estimates were. Given the cost estimates that we're receiving right now for the MISTIP projects, I would estimate it's probably somewhere in the $30 million ballpark, but please don't quote me on that in the future. It's going to be an expensive facility to build.
Without bridge. With bridge, you're talking 60 million probably.
Bridge structures could make it more expensive if we get to that point. But again, providing that certainty that we expect there to be this internal network as this area does develop someday, because it will happen someday. It's really important for setting up the way that the area develops. Without this facility identified, if little pieces start to come into the urban growth boundary, as can happen, like the Sherwood School District example, we'd be providing driveway access to each of those parcels individually directly onto either Roy Rogers or Shoals Ferry Road, which is not a great outcome for Washington County. We would prefer to be planning ahead for a cohesive transportation system. And as you've pointed out with some of the other planning for this area on 175th, when we don't get ahead like this, we miss out on opportunities because things happen that preclude us from being able to do it.
Okay, any other questions? If not, I will open the public hearing on item E3 for the ordinance number 882. And Clerk Moss, do we have anyone who would like to testify?
Yeah, we do, Chair Willie. First, we have Tawny Steele. Tanya, can you hear us?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead for up to 2 minutes.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, Commissioner Harrington and Commissioner Treese. I believe you weren't on the last meeting. I just would like to reiterate again, I'm the Tawny Steele, the owner of Lone Owl Farm. This is the land that will be impacted if this road does go through here. I would again like to reiterate, when I purchased this farm in 2011, all of this land was designated as rural reserve. It was not rural, no reserve. It is not in urban reserve. The example of Sherwood is a nice example, but again, that land was in urban reserve. My farm is not. It was rural reserve, and it just magically became rural, no reserve several years ago with no notification to me, no communication with me from the county. This will impact 26 of my 40-acre farm. So my 40-acre farm will go from being 40 to 14 acres. That is all I will have left. Even a bridge is going to impact me greatly. And there's a lot of talk again about the urban growth boundary, bringing this in, not bringing it in, this happening, not happening. Again, I don't know. And I do take a little exception to what Mr. Rogers said. In 50 years, my children will still remember what happened to this farm. My children work on this farm. My children help me with this farm. This is our farm, and it does impact us. And just to give you a little bit of a hokey analogy, I feel a little bit like maybe I'm in feudal England and the king or queen has ridden up and said, I'm going to confiscate your lands and give them to the Duke of Development, and throws a bag of coinage at me and rides away. That is how this feels at this time as you talk about plowing through my farm. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I would love to take you all out to this farm walk you around so you know what you're looking at and what you're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Next, we have Dale Feeke. Dale, can you hear us?
Yes, Kevin, can you hear me?
We can hear you. You're a little faint, so can you go a little closer to the microphone?
I will try to turn.
Dale, we still can't hear you.
Can't hear me at all?
A little better, a little closer.
It's very muffled.
Is that better? Better now?
No, Dale, we can barely hear you. We'll come back to you, Dale. We'll move on, and I'll make sure to come back to you. Right. Next, we have Andrea D'amico. Andrea, can you hear us?
Good morning.
Please go ahead.
I just wanted to point out a couple of things. There may not be a lot of us at these meetings, like you've mentioned, just 16 at the last, opposing this. But we are a rural community, and the tile flat expansion will affect a lot of land. If this expansion was in an urban neighborhood, you would have 50 people in one block protecting their property. And might I say, that's less land in one neighborhood block than what you guys are affecting by this expansion. Also, at the last two meetings, all we heard was people opposing the tile flat expansion. It seems that the only people in favor of the expansion is the planning department. And at the end of the day, the planning department isn't personally affected. The tile flat expansion affects family farms that have been in their families for generations. It affects our livelihoods. And I just urge you to vote against the expansion. I don't think we need it. And I don't think we need two intersections on a very short spot of Vandermost Road. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next, we have Marilyn Silver. Marilyn, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. Good morning, commissioners. I have submitted written testimony for this meeting. However, after my submission, I heard from staff at the City of Tigard. I had emailed them asking them for the timeline for development of River Terrace 2.0. The answer was, and I quote, "Once Metro approves the UGB expansion, we will move into community planning, which is the comprehensive planning and code writing phase of the work. That should take approximately 18 to 24 months to complete. Once done, property owners and developers will be able to come in with development applications. These usually take a few months to review, and then after that, the construction deadline is up to the developer." This response is interesting in that it says once Metro approves, not if Metro approves. It also assumes that developers will submit plans and states that construction is up to the developer. So we are talking about a timeline of perhaps 3 years, not the 40 to 50 years you assure us. I plan on being around in 3 years, and I bet most of the property owners who have testified will also be around. We don't know the reasons why Tigard is so hell-bent on moving forward so quickly on River Terrace 2.0. They're asking Metro for an exception to their rules, and they're asking Washington County for an exception to rules disallowing a road on rural reserve land. This development is not needed, and the tile road extension is not needed. Unfortunately, the entire project sounds like a done deal. I hope that at least one government entity will heed the concerns of those who object to the onslaught of development for the sake of development and put an end to, or at least delay until population growth warrants, this further ruination of our beautiful rural area. Please do not prioritize developers over your constituents, over the wildlife that will be greatly impacted, and over climate change. Based on population projections, River Terrace 2.0 is not needed now or in the foreseeable future, nor is the extension of Tile Flat Road. I urge you to vote down this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Next, we have Carrie Parmentier. Carrie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for this time. I'd like to just remind you that Ordinance 802 was voted against by the Planning Commission. I know Erin had semantics around, well, it wasn't actually a vote, this or that. They said no. I did appreciate Catherine Harrington's idea that perhaps it could go back there and we could start again. However, I think it's really important that the developers are not seen as buying your vote through funding for roading. That would be atrocious if that was actually happening. Also, with the metro land swap, you could have some unjust enrichment for yourselves. If you go ahead right now and you start purchasing right of ways from these people who don't want to sell them, they're going to be selling at a very low value. And who wins out of that? The county. It doesn't seem fair, and of course it's not right. You are enriching yourselves at the cost of your constituents. There is farmland protection for a reason, and that should remain in place. There is no justification for this ordinance to go ahead. Please listen to your constituents and actually your conscience about what is right rather than what funds are coming your way. The Metro Growth report and the COO's report, that she just recently gave, showed that their growth has slowed to 50% in 5 years and is still slowing. We don't know what roads are needed. You don't know what roads are needed. We have existing roads. Let's use those. Let's safeguard our rural land. Let's look after our constituents and not the developers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carrie. Next, we have Victoria Frankie. Victoria, can you hear us?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Victoria Frankeny, and I am speaking on behalf of Tualatin Riverkeepers. Tualatin Riverkeepers is a nonprofit organization focused on preservation and restoration of the watershed. We have concerns regarding the Tile Flat Road extension. This proposal would cross streams in the project area which feed into the Tualatin River. Road crossings on streams can expose them to further degradation as a result of uncontrolled runoff and additional pollutant load from increased traffic, construction, and impervious surfaces. Degradation of tributary streams that feed into the Tualatin River can result in poor water quality and destroy habitat for native species in the area. These types of runoff are uncontrolled and need engineering measures in place to mitigate harm. In a time where the effects of climate change are becoming more apparent, we need to thoroughly evaluate infrastructure decisions in advance. Severe weather events will continue to become the norm, and our watershed should be able to recover from these events. Maintaining and restoring the integrity of these streams plays a large role in watershed resiliency. Furthermore, we do not feel the county has expressed the need for this expansion to such a degree that the land use goals exceptions should apply here. Road construction would only commence once the area is incorporated into the urban growth boundary, which has yet to occur. The request to adopt the Tile Flat Road extension into the transportation system plan is akin to putting the cart before the horse. We asked the board to gather some more information before issuing a decision. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Victoria. Next, we have John Stone. John, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Commissioners, we are now on our third meeting where people are asking you to not approve Ordinance 822. I've been very saddened to see that after 2 public comment sections and now a third, with people only asking you to disapprove this ordinance, it is still being considered. It seems kind of crazy to me that in Oregon, we would have commissioners who are willing to consider stealing someone's property, and that's what eminent domain is, pave over farmland, pave over multiple streams, pave over wetlands, and continue the destruction of our delicate ecosystem that has already been damaged, all to increase the profit of real estate developers who still have developable land in their area that they haven't used yet, especially considering the population is currently decreasing, something that I've yet to see addressed, but has been brought up many times. It seems like we have people not only willing to do that, but we also have people willing to use taxpayers' hard-earned money to subsidize it by planning and building the infrastructure for them. I am asking you once again to vote no on 822, vote no on picking a big corporation over a small business, vote no on paving over wetlands, vote no on paving over multiple creeks, vote no on putting another massive asphalt slab next to a road that was just doubled in size a few weeks ago, vote no on continuing the destruction of our environment, and vote no on using taxpayer funds to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I will go back to Mr. Feeke. Dale, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me, Kevin?
You're still a little light, but I think we can hear you, so go ahead.
Is that better?
No, it's
Well, here we go. I'll speak loudly, I guess. Chair Harrington and Commissioners, I'm Dale Feeke, Chair of the Washington County Citizen Action Network. We agree with the testimony submitted to you July 25th by 1,000 Friends of Oregon concerning this ordinance. We agree with the testimony submitted to you July 22nd by Safe Philadelphia, and we also agree with the oral testimony that owners of Ponzi Vineyards made on July 26th. I understand that they have submitted written testimony. It appears that the Tile Flat Road does not appear in the Regional Transportation Plan. Our understanding is that undesignated lands are peculiar, even though there may not be a blanket prohibition against adding roads if there is a public need and if they are part of the R2P. Our understanding is that Tigard has asked for UGB extension outside of the normal 6-year process, a mid-cycle review. This might be if the lands are part of the urban reserves and if equivalent buildable land is available elsewhere to take out of the UGB. It appears that only 350 plus acres are buildable. In summary, with new state regulations, there is likely no need to expand the UGB overall, now or in 3 years. In addition, it appears the county wants to connect Tile Flat directly to this new subdivision, which is a bit hard to explain since they have expanded both South Shoals Ferry and Roy Rogers Road. Therefore, it is hard to understand why Ordinance 882 would allow the Tile Flat Road to connect to the neighborhood street. And I agree with the previous testimoniers too, people who testified. Sorry about bad audio.
no problem. Thank you, Mr. Feeke. Would any other members of the public wish to testify on this public hearing item at this time? I'll give you just a moment to raise your hands. Okay, we have Angela. Yes, Ms. Andrew?
Before you promote, Vice Chair Willie, and board, just for your reference, if I heard Mr. Feeke speaking correctly, his testimony mirrors the testimony that was sent to you in your email boxes. So Clerk Moss, I do want to make that a matter of the record. And Mr. Feeke, I hope I heard what you were trying to communicate correctly.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Angie. Next, we have Angela Taylor. Angela, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having this meeting. I would like to just let you know that my family opposes this ordinance. We oppose more roads coming in to our farmland and our newly developed wetlands. We are a proud owner of the stream one of the streams that feed into the Tualatin River, which has recently become the home to about 4 or 5 colonies of beaver. This wetland has not only changed our property, we now are the proud owners of ponds that are becoming lakes in our wetland area. And we, agree and everything that has been said here, we agree with as far as opposing these mass thoroughfares. Ms. Wardell mentioned earlier that the first thing the Planning Commission is supposed to do with a sensitive ecosystem, if I remember correctly, she said, first we avoid. Okay, right now is a great opportunity to avoid. We have a major thoroughfare in Shoals Ferry Road. We do not need another one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Angela. Chair Willie, I do not see any additional hands at this time.
Thank you. And with that, I will.
Mr. Chair, we have one more. Just raise the Anna Ponzi, so we'll allow that. Anna, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. Anna Maria Ponzi, again, owner of property on Vandermost Road. Thank you, Chair Harrington, for again, questioning the actual location. I would strongly encourage Aaron to go ahead and put that road in that map. It is significant. I don't know why it's not been in that slide. I feel that, you know, you've heard from all these people, everyone is saying the same thing. And I think at the end of the day, it's what I said in my earlier testimony, which is we need a master plan. Aaron, you mentioned this development is going to happen. Why do we have an urban growth boundary if development is going to continue to happen on the other side of the urban growth boundary? You mentioned development will happen most likely on the west side. That is farmland. How are we going to, and how are you as county and as transportation planners and county planners going to protect farmland? We need a master plan. Everyone has already mentioned these things. The priority needs to be switched. I urge you to consider this. I urge you to challenge yourselves to present better planning. It needs to be cohesive. You need to get together with your partners. You need to talk. You need to talk to your cities. You need to talk to Metro, and you need to figure out how to protect our valuable farmland. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. We will give one last call for any other remaining participants. Do you want to provide public testimony on this public hearing item? Give you just a moment to utilize the raise hand function. No additional hands, Chair Willie.
All right, thank you very much. I will now close the public hearing and entertain comments or a motion. Chair.
So as we have considered this, I have had the voice of the land use lawyer from Metro while I was a Metro counselor, most of my term, but he retired, a gentleman named Dick Benner. He was with Metro before I joined Metro, but he was there during almost all of the entirety of the Urban and Rural Reserve Program. And during the course of that very extensive program, there was a great deal of discussion amongst community members, with community members, amongst elected officials about what was this rural but not reserves designation all about. It was also referred to as undesignated. The primary purpose of it was to allow for the possibility that with this first ever use of this newfound urban reserve definition, that, you know, a little bit of doubt of would it truly last for an additional 30 years of urban population growth, thereby providing for the 50 to 60 years of land supply. This area that we're talking about was not part of that prolonged urban and rural reserve program, if my memory serves me well. So I can identify why people were very, or remember that area being part of rural reserves. So also what has transpired in my mind over these last 3.5 years is very clearly that urban needs will always, always disregard rural visions, rural use, rural reality. And while providing transportation through a area that is zoned rural but is not rural reserve is allowed, doesn't mean that it's required. Additionally, we over these last 3 years are becoming far smarter about climate impacts and our need to ensure that we keep our urban footprint small and resilient for what we are experiencing now, what we've been experiencing these last few years, and what it seems hard to imagine will be in our future. As such, I will not be supporting the adoption of this ordinance today. And I think the long and short of it, I was still debating in my mind whether or not we should see how the discussions go with Metro and what Metro's thinking is with regard to how we're doing as an urban area in planning for that urban growth. But if we choose option number 2, I'm not sure that I'm going to be ready to support this proposal then either. So I'll just leave that for comments for my colleagues to consider. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Any other comments? So at this time we have.
Jerry, I have a comment or questions.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't see your hand.
That's all right, thanks. I know it's hard to navigate all of those. Aaron, some questions for the record. As I've mentioned, if it would have been my preference a few years back, we would have went up 175th. I still think that was the best alternative, but that's gone. My questions are these. I've heard some claims in regard to someone who had 40 acres and said, we're only going to have 16 left. Unless the roads have changed significantly from what I remember, and that's not that long ago that I looked at the widths, I don't see how anybody could have that much of a taking. And in terms of others, I've heard that there's a pretty significant amount of land being lost from rural use. I think it would be good to clarify the record in terms of what those are. So that's one question. My second question is that it looks like we're trying to hug the boundary. And for those who are watching, by the way, I want to make a comment. That is, we didn't bring this. I mean, this was something that was brought to us by our city partners. So we have listened to them. They're saying they want to develop and they're going to do these things. And so we've kind of got the ball kicked into our courts, and that's why we're sitting here today. But my other question is can we, forgetting even going to the north, at least within the development of Tigard, can we require those urban widths on that road? So at least as assuming they could get through Metro, and I don't know that they could, I will certainly defer to what the chair was saying, and she was mentioning their attorney by the name of Benner, who was just an outstanding individual. Can we at least condition, I guess at the city of Tigard Road, but can we place conditions so at least things are built for the future within the developable area, so that even if it doesn't connect at this point, that there would be some way to have development community, should they do this and should they get this permission, which I don't know that they will. Again, this is outside of our purview, as we all know. We don't have anything to say about this, but I'd be curious about that. So how much land have you guys estimated really will be lost? And secondly, can at least within, if this thing occurs and Metro approves this trade, can we develop some kind of an idea that we would have urban development on the roads within their developable area, if all that made sense?
Several questions there. Let me attempt to answer them and then let me know what I miss in this. As a part of this ordinance and a part of the requirements of the exception, we are designating what's called an exception corridor. And that corridor is really wide. It's much wider than what we actually need for a road. But the reason for that is to allow us to fit our future design within that corridor. It allows for the fact that we just quite frankly don't know what's out there until we're actually in the process of designing a capital project. So that's why we designate the much wider corridor. And I think that's what's alarming when you look at some of these maps. It looks like this road is taking up a huge amount of area, but that's not the road. That's our analysis corridor. The actual roadway, if it's built as a rural collector before urban development comes in, would consist of two 12-foot lanes and a 6-foot shoulder on either side of the road. It would be similar to other rural collector roads that we see around the Cooper Mountain area existing today. Now, it's going to look different if it's built urban. If that area comes into the urban growth boundary and it's built at that time, it would reflect an urban collector standard. That may have narrower travel lanes, depending on City of Tigard design standards for it. It would probably have wider sidewalks and wider bike lanes. So it's a little bit hard to say what it will look like when it's built, because again, it really does depend on that timing and when it's going to come in. But our vision of it for now is that rural section, much narrower than what you see on these maps.
Okay, thank you. Chair, you had your hand up again.
I just wanted to come back to what I heard from Commissioner Rogers, and I may not have heard it correctly. So please help me, Commissioner Rogers, because I'm just trying to understand. I'm particularly trying to understand legally what's involved here. You talked about 175th not being available, but travelers can continue to go north on 175th. The only time that I'm aware of 175th isn't available 24/7 is during the course of a winter snow event. And so, okay, they would have to travel around the mountain by going Shoals Ferry Road to Murray Road and up through the urban area. Am I following you that that's what you were referring to in terms of 175th not being available?
Yeah, thank you. The 175th that you see today was not the 175th that was there a few years ago. The land was owned by the Cemetery District, as probably some of you know, and there was 175th that the county owned the right-of-way, and it was almost about I would say 3-4 blocks of where you see the current 175th. So it was a very different configuration, and I thought we ought to keep that particular right-of-way, but the school district wanted to move their building right over the top of it, so we abandoned that right-of-way, and you saw it shift to the east. So that's why it's gone. I mean, we don't have that option anymore. And with this River Terrace development, had we kept that right-of-way and the district had been able to reconfigure their structures, I don't think we'd be having this discussion, because I think it would have came out of the River Terrace, went straight north on 175th, then the 175th, and connected up the mountain. But that's what I was referring to. That's why, yeah, the current 175th is there, but it's the old one that we abandoned that really was a direct shoot off of where this development is now occurring. So that's what I was referring to.
So,
Old news.
so I do follow you now. Thank you. But in essence, given that the urban reserve, the blue area in that map abuts with Shoals Ferry Road, the traffic could go through that blue area up to Shoals Ferry Road, and there would be an inconvenient kink, right? Much like existed in many areas previously. It's just not as convenient for lining up with Tile Flat Road. But then again, it doesn't impact those rural properties in the non-reserve area. But now I understand your comment. Thank you very much for helping me.
Okay, any other comments?
I think I would like to ask a clarifying question to Chair Harrington. I think I myself am interested in option 2 of our discussion, but I hear you make another option. Or is that what you're?
No, I was saying that, whoops. Am I unmuted? Yes, thank you.
Yes.
I was saying that I am no on option 1. I will vote no if it is if the motion is option 1. I am open to voting yes on option 2, but I want to be clear for folks that if this comes back to us in the future, I may still vote no. Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I think yeah, and I think Tom, maybe this next question is for you. How do we make a motion on option 2 if what's in front of us is the staff recommendation? So
as I understood it, the motion would be to continue Ordinance 882 to a date certain. And Ms. Wardell has suggested a date in January of 2023 that would be after the Metro Council acted. So the motion would be a motion to continue.
And since I'm not chairing the meeting, this is one of those very few times where I can make such a motion. So unless Commissioner Fye, unless you're interested in making that motion, I am more than happy to make the motion that we continue this ordinance. I want to make sure to a date certain of January 24th, 2023.
I second that motion.
So I have a motion and a second for option number 2 as presented in the staff presentation. Any comments?
I'll make a comment. I really don't have an objection to that. I just don't want us, meaning the general public, to be ill-equipped to make certain requirements. And it sounds like we would be able to do that still. And I don't want the public to be beating up on Aaron and you or Stephen. You were doing what you had to do with the planning, so I don't think there was anything wrong. My comments earlier, and I still stand by them, are that we unfortunately foreclosed some options that we had way back when. And unfortunately, you know, if I had my druthers, we'd go back a number of years and do different things. But I don't want you to feel like, you know, people are saying you did something wrong, because you didn't. I mean, we were having to deal with things that were thrust upon us as a county government doing a transportation plan. But I don't have any objections to the proposal at all.
Okay. I have a motion and a second that we will, we are approving option number 2 for a continuance of this. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hand.
Do we need to do a roll call, Mr. Carr?
You do not.
Okay.
A motion to continue, you need a roll call for a motion to adopt an ordinance. A motion to continue just requires a show of hands. But thank you for checking.
Okay,
I always
so we
check.
have,
Sorry, Vice Chair Willie, my
no, that
apologies.
perfectly fine. I was thinking the same thing, only when we went to the continuance, I thought we probably didn't. So, so yes, if I understand correctly, we had a vote of 5-0 for a continuance. Tom, my next question is under action item F1 is adopt the findings. Do we not do that since we are a continuance?
That's correct.
Okay. So, okay. Everybody good on that? We have completed the public hearing E3. We will not be taking action on F1. Tanya, I need to ask what your thoughts are on going back to proclamations now, because action F2 could be a little bit timely as well. So what would you prefer us to do?
I wasn't prepared for that question. I'm scrolling through to see where our staff team is. I would suggest we move proclamation. We're ready.
Okay. All right. We are going to
technology and having the speed of Teams messages coming in quickly. I appreciate the team being on standby.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for that. And we will now go back to proclamations, item D1. Proclaim August 2022 as National Breastfeeding Month in Washington County. Mayor Samantha, would you please take that on?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Good morning, Vice Chair Willie, Board of County Commissioners. I am pleased to be here before you this morning. My name is Mira Samantha. I'm the Interim Director of Health and Human Services. And we are here this morning to ask for the board to proclaim August 2022 as National Breastfeeding Month in Washington County. I have a fantastic team here with me today. So I will introduce Marie Bowman Davis, who is our Public Health Division Manager. We also have Jeanette Lopez, who is our Public Health Lactation Consultant. And we do have a guest who may or may not be joining us to read the proclamation. If she jumps on, I will have Jeanette introduce her at that time. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Marie, who should be turning on her camera momentarily.
Thank you, Mira. Good morning, commissioners. There we go. For the record, my name is Marie Bowman Davis. I am the board appointed local public health administrator and public health division manager. As Mira mentioned, we have a team here today to provide you a presentation requesting your board proclaims August 2022 as National Breastfeeding Month. This is in alignment with the national celebration of breastfeeding efforts. These efforts include breastfeeding promotion, support, education, research, and normalizing breastfeeding as the gold standard of infant nutrition. This proclamation is supported by the board's Public Health Advisory Council. I will now turn this over to Jeanette, our Public Health Lactation Consultant.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity to be here today. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Jeanette Lopez, and my role at the county is as Public Health Lactation Consultant. I work with the Women, Infants, and Children program, and I've been with Washington County for about 12 years. And my purpose for being here today is to request that August once again be proclaimed as National Breastfeeding Month in Washington County. Next slide, please. A brief look at the breastfeeding services at Washington County shows us that two programs exist to provide support for breastfeeding families. One is the Nurse Home Visiting Program, which is supported by the Maternal Child and Family Team, or MCF. The other is the Breastfeeding Peer Counseling Program, which is supported by the Women, Infants, and Children, or WIC team. Both MCF and WIC can be found in the Public Health Division within Health and Human Services. Next slide, please. Now, looking more closely at the Maternal Child and Family Program, we know they have several nurses on staff who are internationally board certified lactation consultants. And this team offers in-home breastfeeding support for families. And in partnership with WIC, this team provides options to support a family's breastfeeding journey with a family-centered and trauma-informed approach. Next slide. And within Washington County's WIC program, the Breastfeeding Peer Counseling team provides a range of services. A warm line is available in which the team communicates using text message, email, telephone, and one-on-one visits. And these services are available evenings and weekends. A virtual breastfeeding circle is conducted by a team of skilled and experienced breastfeeding support staff. And all of these services are available in English and Spanish with access to support additional language needs using professional interpretation services. Next slide. Washington County Public Health has begun a project that's well aligned with our division's strategic plan. The Public Health Strategic Plan has identified 4 priorities, which include health equity, best and promising practice, partnerships and engagement, and communication. Our project uses these 4 strategies as a driving force behind a carefully planned breastfeeding community needs assessment. This assessment will enable us to better understand the lactation landscape in Washington County. We want to know what barriers are experienced by lactation service providers, as well as what gaps in care are experienced by the families in our community. And by committing ourselves to understanding these barriers, we can make data-driven decisions to remove them. What we learn will enable us to strengthen partnerships, improve communication, and advance health equity in response to what our community needs. Next slide, please. This project also furthers Washington County's efforts to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion. Public health will center principles of family-centered care, implicit bias awareness, and cultural humility to integrate the kind of lactation care that responds to the intersectionality of family identities. This work aims to improve outcomes for all. Next slide. Excuse me. Before I introduce our testimonial presenter, I would like to take a moment to briefly address the recent formula crisis, where state and local WIC agencies continue to be at the forefront of this response. In February of this year, a prominent manufacturer of infant formula began investigating claims of bacterial contamination in their products, as some infants became hospitalized and 1 infant death was reported. This recall came on the heels of an already existing distribution challenge that left stores with inadequate stock. And additionally, after the factory reopened, 2 weeks later, it closed again, this time on account of flooding. As Washington County WIC took swift action to work with our state partners, WIC's breastfeeding team was called to task. Our families now wanted to know more about relactation, and those who were exclusively breastfeeding kept it going for longer with a renewed sense of motivation. And in an incredible display of community, our participants wanted to learn how to create a surplus of breast milk, not only for themselves, but for the families who needed it. The only human milk bank in the Pacific Northwest happens to be located in Tigard. And this Northwest Mother's Milk Bank rose to the occasion to process a 3-fold increase in donated milk. As this formula crisis continues to unfold, WIC continues to be there for the Washington County community by guiding families through these times. And a large part of that support includes support for breastfeeding. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to give Rebecca Medeiros some time to speak. She is a WIC participant who received support from our Breastfeeding Peer Counseling team. Rebecca experienced many of the common struggles faced by so many families in Washington County, and our Breastfeeding Peer Counseling team was there for her, and she's here with us today, hopefully, to share her story. Can I ask if Rebecca is present? I'd like to turn it over to her.
Hi, Jeanette. She was on earlier, but she is not currently online with us.
Okay, no problem. I do have her.
Okay, sorry for the interruption, but I do see a hand up, a different last name, but the first name Rebecca. I'm wondering if that might be her Kevin.
Rebecca, is that you? Can you hear us?
Yes, it is. It accidentally did my maiden name instead of my married name. Sorry about that.
Yep. All right. We will have her rejoin as a panelist momentarily.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. My name is Rebecca Medeiros. I live in Banks, Oregon, where my husband and I manage apartments, and my husband is also a plumbing apprentice. We have two boys, Evan, who's 2.5, and my little son, Wesley, who's 9 months old, and they're all boy. They love being outside. They love playing in the dirt, motorcycles, Spider-Man, you name it. So I was asked to share my experience with WIC and how that helped me in my breastfeeding journey. Before receiving WIC breastfeeding support, I thought breastfeeding would come so naturally. I had heard that it takes a while for your body to get accustomed to breastfeeding, but I didn't know about the many different complications that can come with it. My first son, Evan, had a hard time latching properly. And there were nights where he would cry. And I knew that if I nursed him, he would be fine. Like, he wasn't hungry. He was just sad. He wanted comfort. But I hurt so bad that I couldn't bring myself to do it. And when I knew that he was hungry, I would cry when he latched on because of the intense pain. Just was not a good experience at all. But the breastfeeding team at WIC, pre-COVID, they had a peer group, like a breastfeeding circle is what they called it. And through that breastfeeding team, I was able to get help with infant, they call it baby-led latching. So we were able to improve Evan's latch, and I was able to heal, and I actually started to enjoy breastfeeding. With the peer group meetings, I heard about other women getting mastitis, and because of what I heard, I was able to catch it early when I started getting it. And I also learned what other people were doing to build up their breast milk storage in their freezers, and how they were doing with breastfeeding and pumping at work. So this is all stuff that you can find online, but it was so much more meaningful for me to get it from other mothers who are in the same life stage as me, because you get the added interaction and the added outside support. Barb was my breastfeeding peer counselor and the person leading the WIC breastfeeding peer group. After COVID started, 5 months after Evan was born, instead of holding in-person groups, they began offering support mainly by texting and email. So when I was pregnant with Wesley in 2021, Barb reached out and gave me information to read or videos to watch that reminded me of what I had learned with Evan. And breastfeeding went much smoother with Wesley. He's 9 months old now, and I'm still enjoying breastfeeding him. Aside from the WIC breastfeeding support, I did see a lactation consultant at the hospital before I was discharged, and a week after Wesley was born. I do think if I needed to, I could have gotten more help from them, but the breastfeeding support at WIC is very unique. With the WIC breastfeeding support, I didn't feel like I needed to make an appointment or see a doctor I didn't know, etc. Instead, I could just send an email in the middle of a problem or crisis, or simply shoot off a quick question, even if it wasn't urgent. And knowing that I had breastfeeding experts at my fingertips made a huge difference in my state of mind and my confidence. So without the support I received from WIC, I wouldn't have continued trying to breastfeed Evan, and I probably would have been really anxious about breastfeeding Wesley. With the support I received from WIC, I have been given more confidence and peace because I know there's someone who will respond to my questions quickly. I was able to, like I said before, I was able to breastfeed Evan for 9 months, and Wesley is 9 months now, and I'm still breastfeeding him. And I didn't have to panic during the formula shortage because I had it covered. I was breastfeeding. Being able to breastfeed feels like I'm fulfilling my purpose of nurturing my babies and giving them what's best for them. So thank you for providing me the opportunity to share my story with you all today.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for being here and being willing to share your personal experience. I also want to thank the Board of County Commissioners for allowing us this opportunity to bring awareness to the importance of breastfeeding as a primary public health prevention strategy. And finally, I would like to request that August 2022 be proclaimed as National Breastfeeding Month in Washington County.
Could we have, did you have someone scheduled to read the proclamation?
Yes, I can do that now.
Would you please do that?
Sure. Proclamation, Board of Commissioners for Washington County, National Breastfeeding Month Proclamation, August 2nd, 2022. Whereas Washington County Women, Infants, and Children and the Maternal, Child, and Families team of in-home visiting nurses serve more than 5,600 families per month. Many are from communities of color, making economic, cultural, and other contributions to our community every day. And whereas Washington County recognizes that breastfeeding is the preferred source of nutrition for infants, adapting over time to meet the changing needs of the growing infant. The county's breastfeeding support programs have a commitment to provide education and resources that help families make informed infant feeding choices through classes, text messaging, one-on-one peer counseling, and connections to accessible educational information. And whereas Washington County is stronger when infants are provided a safe, reliable, and renewable food source, especially critical during natural disasters, formula shortages, and emergency situations. And whereas together we can do great things is the theme of this year's National Breastfeeding Month. Washington County is rising to that challenge by conducting a community-wide breastfeeding needs assessment to better understand the needs of breastfeeding families, as well as the needs of local lactation service providers, with the goal of creating a seamless community care experience for families throughout the county. And whereas Washington County recognizes the complex web of support and physical factors needed for breastfeeding to be successful, and acknowledges those individuals unable to meet their breastfeeding goals due to circumstances beyond their control. These individuals persevere by making the best infant feeding choices for themselves and their families. Whereas the common issues facing breastfeeding mothers, like access to skilled breastfeeding support, was exacerbated during the crisis of COVID-19. WIC's Breastfeeding Peer Counseling Program that provides monthly text message and telehealth support to pregnant and breastfeeding people have made the difference for many. And now, therefore, be it resolved that on this second day of August 2022, the Washington County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim August as National Breastfeeding Month in Washington County. We urge every resident to recognize breastfeeding as a proven primary prevention strategy, protecting both infants and mothers from a host of chronic and acute diseases and conditions, and building a foundation for lifelong health and wellness, and for bringing awareness to the unique barriers breastfeeding families face and continue to adapt and overcome. Thank you.
Thank you for reading that. Thank you, Rebecca, for your information, certainly that you provided to us, a personal experience. Thanks to WIC for being a great department and doing a great job helping our mothers and certainly families in their health, and certainly what we like to promote. So great job on that. Any other comments from the commissioners before we have a motion to approve? Yes, go ahead, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Willie. I just want to say that I am really grateful for our staff bringing this forward, and for Ms. Medeiros for bringing this to life through her personal experience. And I look forward to our team putting out the media post about this so that I can then share these incredible resources of support out through the community in my role. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Anyone else? Commissioner Treese.
I want to echo the chair's comments. I also want to underscore a line in the proclamation that where you address women who have not been successful for whatever reason, and their nutritional choices as well. I think that that's really an important factor here. You know, it looks almost as like, you know, we've worked so hard to get breastfeeding normalized, but at the same time, we want to make sure that all women, all mothers are supported through their choices and whatever difficulties they face. So when I look to the work that you do, I certainly support the work around breastfeeding, and I support your approach to the whole issue, not not at the exclusion of other situations. So thank you for that. And here's to a healthy Washington County.
Any other comments? Entertain a motion to approve. I have a motion from
I'll
Commissioner
second.
Treese, a second from Chair Harrington. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your hands. Those opposed, motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you very much, Mira, and everyone on your team here for bringing this forward to us. It was a great presentation, so thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now to our last item, F2, which is to consider Ordinance 888 and resolution and order that would refer ballot measure to county voters on November 8, 2022, regarding whether to temporarily opt out of the Sycamore business for a period not to exceed 2 years. Entertain a motion to read Ordinance 888 by title only.
Before we do that, time check. It's 12 o'clock right now. We're gonna just keep pushing and then come back.
Yeah, we need to wrap, well, my sense is we need to wrap this up now. I know, what I don't know is how many people we have that has come on that wants to make public communication in the next item. I don't think item F2 will take too much time. Tom, what do you recommend here?
We have only 6 slides. It's staff only presentation, so whichever the commission prefers, we can handle.
Okay, yeah, if that's okay, Nafisa, is it okay if we move ahead on this? Okay, good.
Yes. I'm going to step out and use the restroom.
We can take a 5-minute break if you want to do that, if everybody wants to do that. Okay, is 5 enough? You want 10? 5? Let's do 5.
Vice Chair, just one item of housekeeping. I would like to request that the commission entertain a motion to continue item F1 to the same January 24th, 2023 meeting that you continued Ordinance 8822. That's the findings for it. So just for completeness, if we could do that, that would be great.
All right, so when we come back, we'll start with that one, Tom, and then we'll move into F2. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and I'll see you in 5. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just told Jerry he had 10 seconds. He said that Tom had run, he thought you had given him more time. Nah, Tom's on.
Tom's faster than I thought he was.
Commissioner Rogers, are you back with us?
There he is.
Thank you for the break.
Yes, and I apologize. I actually thought I was the only one that really needed that break, but so I was gonna gut that out. Anyway, thank you, Chair. Great suggestion. We will now go back to item F2. Actually, I'm gonna go to F1 at Tom's recommendation. So Tom, would you convey what we need to do on F1 there?
A motion to continue to the January 24th, 2023 meeting.
All right, I have a motion from Commissioner Rogers, a second from Chair Harrington. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your hands. Good, motion carries unanimously 5-0. Let's now go to F2. And I would entertain a motion to read Ordinance 888 by title only. I have a motion from the chair, and I can only see the chair. I can't see Roy, so do I have a second? Okay, I have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
And
It's unanimous.
it's unanimous. Thank you.
Aye.
Again, I only have 5 squares here. Thank you. So that passes 5-0. Go ahead, Tom.
Ordinance 888, an ordinance declaring a temporary ban on certain psilocybin businesses and declaring an emergency.
All right, thank you. Now, could we have the staff report?
Thank you. And I will be doing the staff report, although I am joined by Stephen Roberts, Teresa Cherniak, and Rob Povett to answer any questions that the commission might have. Next slide, please. So this is just some background. As you know, Measure 109 passed in November 2020. It legalizes licensed and regulated manufacturing, transportation, delivery, sale, and purchase of psilocybin products. The vote in Washington County was had 59% approval, which is higher than the statewide approval of 56%. We are waiting for the Oregon Health Authority to complete some rulemaking. The rules are expected to be completed by December of 2022. On January 2nd, 2023, OHA will begin to accept licenses. If this measure is not approved by the voters, those licenses will be accepted. Measure 109 allows for local jurisdictions to opt out by passing an ordinance, which after informing OHA will stop OHA from accepting any licenses in the jurisdiction that has passed such an ordinance. If the ordinance then needs to be approved by the voters at the next general election. Next slide, please. So this is the prior board consideration. There was a work session on July 12th where the board directed the county council to develop this ordinance. The first reading was on July 19th. Next slide, please. July 26th, the board held its public hearing. The board did not direct any engrossment. The action is scheduled for today, August 2nd. The charter requires 2 weeks between introduction, 14 days between introduction and passage. So this is the first day the board can consider passage. Next slide, please. So staff recommends that the commission pass this ordinance to allow for a temporary opt-out, a maximum of 2 years. As the board knows that the opt-out can be ended at any time by a simple vote of the board. We do not require an additional public vote to end the moratorium. So it's a maximum of 2 years, but could be less depending on what the board does. This will give the LUT and HHS departments time to develop rules for Washington County, particularly land use rules. Next slide, please. So this is the timeline. We're here to consider enactment of Ordinance 888 and consider adoption of the resolution in order calling for an election. The election would be November 8th. Next slide, please. So there are three options now, since there's no longer an option to amend. Option one would be to reject the ordinance, no temporary opt-out. Option two, take no action now, defer action on ordinance to November or December. Option three, approve the ordinance on August 2nd and implement opt-out with a 2-year sunset. Under option three, as I said, the board could repeal it at any time, and this is the staff recommendation. There's the recommendation of HHS and LUT. The County Council's office is taking no position. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Tom. And yeah, if you could take the slide presentation down so I can see everyone. Thank you. Commissioners, comments?
I'm happy to start.
Okay, go right ahead.
I will be voting to disapprove this ordinance. So if there is a motion to proceed, I will be voting no. I've had the opportunity to continue to do very easy research. The provisions as approved by the voters and covered by information available on the Oregon Health Authority's website. All you have to do is Google OHA psilocybin. And if you're not sure how to spell it, it's PSILOCYBIN. You'll find information that made it clear to me that citing such of these facilities is not like the marijuana local citing that the previous Board of Commissioners went through, particularly since there's no retail sales, only use of the substance through supervised on-site facilities, and the manufacturing is quite controlled as well. The webinar for local governments makes it very clear what the timeline of key dates is, that June 30th, there were recommendations for remaining rules for the Rules Advisory Committee to entertain, listening sessions in July, and then subsequent actions moving forward. There's also a frequently asked questions by local governments and for local governments. And on page 3 of that document, it makes it very clear that research suggests that psilocybin may help reduce depression, anxiety, including end-of-life anxiety, problematic alcohol and tobacco use, and trauma-related disorders, including PTSD, post-traumatic stress disease. So given the amount of information that is available today, including draft rules that have gone through a lot of research, committee formation, and so forth, I think we're in a pretty good way. And as noted, Washington County voters approved this by a vote of 59% in November of 2020 and statewide by 56%. So I think we've needed to be prepared for this. And as we've noted previously, one of our difficulties is in following through with the same sort of state mandated work that cities are required to do. And we struggle to do so because we do not have city revenues like cities do. We cannot deviate from using county-wide resources for doing city-like work, since we have more than enough county-wide work that needs to be funded. So as such, I will not be voting in support of Ordinance 888. And that concludes my comments as going first.
All right. Thank you very much, Chair. Anyone else? Not seeing any hands. Commissioner Treese.
Thank you. I will not be voting to move this to the ballot. I feel I agree with the chair in relationship to our preparedness, but for me the biggest piece is here. I'm very uncomfortable going against or even postponing the vote of the people, and that's a very important piece to me. So especially in consideration that we were, as our Mr. Carr pointed out, at 59% approval of this ballot measure. So that is my position.
Okay. Anyone else caring to make comments? My comment would be that I just feel it's important that we get this right, and I think we need to have opportunity for our staff to make sure we get this right, especially the sightings and the OHA rules. So I just think it behooves us. But then the flip side to this is we put this option out to the voters and they say no, we're back to initiating it January 1. So to me, we're still giving them that option to do that. So that's all I have to say. Entertain a motion to either.
I have my hand raised.
I'm sorry.
Vice Chair Willie, it's okay. It's okay. Will there be an opportunity to comment after the public hearing, or is there not?
This is
Okay,
not a public
okay.
hearing.
This is no public.
This
Okay.
is action. Nope.
Okay. This is action. Okay. Okay. I think I'll make a comment if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Sorry for its delay. I don't know why I thought about the public hearing. I should have my agenda up here. My comment would be, I really appreciated our board having this conversation with our community. I'm so glad that this topic, the staff brought it to us, and we've come a long way. The first question I asked when we were doing our work session was, is this addictive? And since then, we've heard from advocates and people who benefited this cycle, the psilocybin. So I really appreciated hearing from the community. I really appreciated our staff having this courageous conversation with us, even though, from a public health perspective, I've always been clear on where I stand on issues. But more importantly, I wanted to really have the opportunity to engage a dialogue with our community, and especially when it comes to issues or topics around psychiatric issues. It's really, we usually tend to hear from the naysayers, and I was really glad from the community advocates that reached out to us and that reached out to their supporters to bring people, even though it was late at night. You really had folks that stayed up and add their concerns and comments. And with that, I will be voting with Chair Harrington and Commissioner Treese in support of rejecting this ordinance.
Just a quick comment, Vice Chair Willie. I tend to be in the same position you are. I think the staff did a good job of trying to analyze what additional information we might need and get this completely correct. And so I don't think we're delaying much of anything by doing the resolution. But it's pretty obvious. It's 3-2, it sounds like. So I think I just call for the question. Let's vote.
So I need a motion to reject ordinance 888 is what I need.
Correct.
Do I have that? I have a motion from Commissioner Fye, a second from
Point of
to
clarification.
reject, right?
I'm assuming we have to take a vote to reject this, Tom, as much as we would have to take a vote to approve this.
Yeah. My preference would be a vote to approve that was voted down, but you can do it either way.
Oh, okay. Okay, and so Commissioner Fye, would you please amend your motion to approve?
No,
No.
she can't do that. She would have to vote against her own motion. So it would have to be either you or Commissioner Rogers who would make a motion to approve.
I'd move that we approve the ordinance.
Okay, I second. So we now have a motion by Commissioner Rogers, a second by Commissioner Willie to approve Ordinance 888. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Pardon me?
This needs to be a roll call.
This needs to be a roll call. Okay, Kevin, you're on.
Thank you, Chair Willie. Commissioner Fye.
No.
Commissioner Rogers.
Aye.
Commissioner Treese.
Nay.
Chair Harrington.
No.
Chair Willie.
Yes. The motion fails by a 3-2 vote. So we good, Tom?
Yes, and then we'll take no action on the subsequent item.
We will take no action. That's
Which
exactly
would be the
correct.
resolution in order to post on the ballot.
Okay. So with that, we are going to move into public communication.
Would any members of the public like to provide public comment to the Board of Commissioners on any county topic for up to 5 minutes for this time? I'll give you just a moment to utilize the raise hand function. Not seeing any hands, Chair Willie.
All right, thank you very much. Kevin, would you mind doing the board announcements of the Board of Commissions meeting scheduled?
Yes, I would be happy to. Next week, Tuesday, August the 9th, the board will be meeting in work sessions starting at 9 a.m. and continuing out through the day for the topics. The following week, August 16th, due to no quorum, the board will not be meeting for any meetings that week. The following week, Tuesday, August 23rd, the board will be meeting in an afternoon work session starting at 2 p.m. with a board meeting following at 6:30 p.m. There will be no meetings Tuesday, August 30th, as that is the 5th Tuesday. The board will be convening Thursday, September 1st for their roundtable, and we will note that this will be the return to in-person and hybrid meetings starting in September. So all meetings will be back. The board will be in person in the auditorium and work session room. On Tuesday, September 6th, the board is back to a 9 a.m. work session with a board meeting follow at 10 a.m. Tuesday, September 13th, the board has a work session at 9 a.m. On Tuesday, September 20th, the board will meeting just like today at 9 a.m. and a board meeting at 10 a.m. And Tuesday, September 27th, the board will convene a work session at 2 p.m. with a board meeting at 6:30 p.m. Back to you, Chair Willie.
Great. Good recap. Thank you very much. It'll be good for us to get back in person. It will certainly be different. So with that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Commissioner Treese, second by Commissioner Fye. All those in favor signify by saying aye, raising your hand. It's unanimous 5-0. We could reconvene at 1 o'clock if you want a 35-minute lunch. If you want longer than that, just talk to me. What do you want?
I'm okay with 30-minute lunch.
Okay.
It's hard for me to get out and back, Jerry, but if everybody else wants to do it, I'll just be a little late, and that's fine.
Why don't we make it 45?
Yeah, let's meet at 1:15 then. How's that?
Okay.
All right. So we are, this meeting is adjourned. We will reconvene in work session at 1:15. Thank you.
Thank you.